Hey guys, I'm probably a teeny bit late to this party, but there's a couple things I want to dig into. Just have a little chat with you guys about the Michael album. Um, I've been listening to a pretty amazing podcast by my buddy Damien Shields. In fact, I want to make sure I give credit here where credit is due. Damien Shields, Dan, forgive me, I'm going to mispronounce your name, but Dan Villabagos. I know I screwed it up, Dan, I'm sorry. And of course, Jamin Bull. A while back, they released a pretty amazing podcast called Faking Michael. And maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't. It's a pretty extraordinary listen. I'll be honest, I'm only up to episode 11. 11. And each episode is, I don't know, 48 minutes to 65 minutes long, something like that. It's an amazing amount of research that Damien has done. Damien is this remarkably cool legend on the Gold Coast of Australia. I met Damien many years ago at one of my events in LA. The dude's just a legend. He's cool, he's got a beautiful smile, and he is passionate about the Faking Michael saga. So we're going to talk about that just a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of take it to a different place that me just listening to this podcast kind of made me start thinking about a few things that I thought I'd share with you guys. So that's what we're going to dig into right now. So hang out with us in the studio. Whenever I do my live events, almost without fail, I do a quick little poll, and it's something that's just kind of fun. I'll ask people, what's your favorite MJ album? And for MJ fans, that's like an impossible question. It's like asking somebody with 5 children, which one's your favorite, or 7 children, or 11 children. But I kind of make them choose in the moment, and I'll say, okay, right now, at this moment, what's your favorite MJ album? I usually start with Off the Wall, then Thriller, then Bad, Dangerous, History, Blood, Invincible. And then a lot of times I'll say Michael. And I get kind of the snickers, a couple boos, things like that. And it's a tough one because there really is some great music on here. I didn't work on this album. I didn't work on a single note of it. I wasn't there for the big listening sessions. I heard about them. So I'm kind of impartial to the whole thing. The album itself, and I'm not going to defend the album. I'm not going to tell you to buy the album. You've already probably made up your mind. There is some beautiful music on here. I Like the Way That You Love Me, I think is a really pretty song. Jump back here to, we'll skip over breaking news just for a second. The Much Too Soon, my goodness. I mean, it was mixed by Alan Sides. Such a pretty, simple, beautiful MJ song. I don't want to Hold My Hand, with Akon. Not my favorite, but it's a fun song. Hollywood Tonight. I think Brad Buxer was very involved in that. I wasn't there, so I'm not going to get into too much of the minutia of. I don't think I've ever met the Cassios. It's possible that they were at Neverland, on one of my visits, but I certainly didn't know them. I have no friendship, nor do I feel a tremendous amount of emotion towards them at all. But listening to Damien's podcast, my goodness, Damien and his team probably put more time and sweat and blood and tears and energy and money into their work probably than a lot of people do for their college thesis or their doctrinal whatever. It's an amazing undertaking that he is doing or did. And so like I say, I'm only up to I think episode 11, and I know I'm kind of on the home stretch, and maybe I should hear the whole thing before I talk to you guys about it. And I'm not here to throw more gasoline onto the fire or anything like that. Number one, I commend Damien and his team, and he doesn't know I'm doing this. In fact, I've reached out to Damien for a while. I was in Australia earlier this year, and I was hoping that we could have crossed paths or had a beer or something, and it just didn't work out. So Damien, number one, next time you're in the U.S. or I'm in Australia or we meet up in some bizarre country, I would love to have a chat with you and reconnect and, buy you a beer or fish and chips or whatever you want. I commend you, man. It's a huge undertaking that you did. And it's very compelling. It's an interesting podcast. I would highly recommend, if you're an MJ fan, if you're curious about it, Faking Michael. You can find it on all the normal platforms, and go ahead and dig into it. Make up your own mind. Obviously, there are some songs on here that if you buy the Michael album now, aren't on it anymore, which is kind of interesting. I don't have the verbiage or the apology or whatever in front of me. So I don't really know how the whole, I guess when I get to the end of Damien's podcast, I'll hear how the whole thing, kind of resolved itself or those songs were removed. I'm repeating myself. The unfortunate thing is that obviously it would seem the estate and Sony and different people were in such a rush to get some product out for MJ's fans that they went ahead and stuck some songs in that very clearly did not seem to be sung by Michael. And that's, the whole thing's just unfortunate. It's just unfortunate. So breaking news seems to be the linchpin in the whole thing. And again, I'm not trying to throw any gasoline on the fire, but a big part of it is obviously the vocals. And one of the things that it was interesting to hear Michael Prince over and over again. He's in this. I don't know if he knows how much he's in this podcast, but he's in it a lot. I just texted Michael a couple days ago, and he's just a sweet, sweet friend. And it's so interesting to hear his perspective on the whole thing, talking about how Michael did his vocals, how you never, ever, ever, ever erase anything. To the contrary, I think Michael's words were you back it up 3 times. When I worked with Michael in the studio, I'm not sure we backed it up 3 times, but we certainly did have back then it was tape, so it was a little bit different. Tape doesn't usually just, disappear or get erased or anything unless it's very intentional. But Michael talked about how, when he worked with Michael Prince talked about when he worked with Michael Jackson, you would double and triple back up everything. And especially on hard drives, it's not that labor intensive. You copy the files from one drive to another. So it's interesting that the Casio fiasco said that, they destroyed all the hard drives, everything was destroyed. The tracks were erased, the hard drives were destroyed, the computer was destroyed. Just crazy stuff that no one would ever do working with an artist like Michael Jackson. There's no logical reason to destroy all those files. It would basically be criminal. There was a lot of talk, and this is kind of the point that I'm going to start heading towards, is lead vocals. I've had the privilege of not only being in the room, but oftentimes running the tape machine, doing lead vocals with Michael Jackson. And it's a fascinating process. And I kind of want to take you through it just a little bit and describe the setup of it and the process. So let's roll back. Let's go back to about 1990. And I don't really have like a whole prop set up here, but a little project called Dangerous where Michael actually did sing all the vocals. Let's look at a song like, I don't know, take your pick. We'll talk about Will You Be There just a little bit. The Dangerous project, depending on how you do the math and how you define start and stop and all that, lasted somewhere between 24 to 28 months, something like that. Went through about 4 production teams, and I talk about this pretty in depth in my live events about the 3 production teams, and we kind of started with Brian Loren, and then that kind of segued into Teddy Riley. Bruce Swedeen was heading up one of the teams, and Bill Bottrell was heading up one of the teams. We had a lot of songs. There was a lot of songs, a lot of song ideas, a lot of different songwriters pitching songs, and all of this was recorded. We would do a song, even a song like Will You Be There? Will You Be There, I think, was about 6 months in production, something like that. And in that particular case, of course, it was written by Michael. Michael came in, and Bart Stevens, I was there for a lot of this song. I wasn't there for the very first day. But Bart Stevens, my buddy in Texas, one of our assistant engineers on the project, does a really nice job of telling this story. And he talks about how he and Matt Forger and Brad Buxer, Michael came in and had this idea for a song, and I'm just using "Will You Be There" as an example. And I think originally it was called "Save Me." And he came in, and he had the rhythm. He basically had the whole song in his head, and he had the whole rhythm track. He knew what he wanted. He wanted all these like very percussive sounds. So they went through the studio, and to hear Bart tell it, it was Bart, Matt, and Michael, and I think Buxer came in later in the day, and they started doing all these little percussive tracks and just recording them, kind of that little shuffle tempo that it has. Over time, Michael did sing kind of what's called a scratch vocal. When Michael sings a scratch vocal, all it really is a melody line. On a project like Dangerous, and we were calling Dangerous Decade for a long time. That was the name of the project. But on a project like Dangerous, there's a lot of songs in production. I mean, you could read the album yourself. You know most of them. Hopefully you enjoy most of them. We worked really hard on them. A lot of those songs are not going to get picked. Michael he's plowing through a lot of music, and he's pulling some music from the past. He's trying some music that different people are bringing in, and he's writing his own songs in real time. But he's not doing a lot of lead vocals. Now, Michael Prince talked about this a little bit in Damien's podcast, and I'm going to kind of reiterate it or kind of explain it the way that I remember it. Michael did not. I usually break vocals up into 3 parts. In other words, if it's a new song, Michael's probably going to do a scratch vocal right away and kind of get that melody line down and kind of show you where the song is going to go. And then as it really starts to take shape, he's probably going to do the background vocals. And the background vocals it's almost always Michael. On the Dangerous album, I mean, obviously there might be a choir or something, but most of the background vocals, the harmonies, are all Michael. And so that's when the song is really starting to gel. It's getting a bit more serious. Now we've got, a really nice music bed. We've brought in, the guitars, we've brought in the drums, we've brought in bass, various overdubs, things like that. And we've got Michael's scratch vocal carrying the melody, and then we're going to do the background vocals. And then you kind of know, okay, this song's getting a bit more serious. And so I'm thinking about all this stuff as I'm listening to Damien's podcast and listening to Michael Prince, because he and I kind of had parallel working styles. I was a few years before Michael Prince, and Michael Prince was there literally on the day that Michael passed away in June of 2009. So you've got the music bed, you've got the background vocals, and you've got the scratch vocal. Now the song might kind of be put on the shelf just a little bit. And we're going to be working on other songs. We're going to be working on Black or White. Who Is It and In the Closet, and then a lot of songs that didn't make it on the project. There's just a lot going on through the whole process. And this is just the way Michael did it. It's not the way that everybody does it, but it's the way Michael did it. So then we used to get all these faxes from like Sandy Gallen, Michael's manager back then, and we might get them from Epic Records, but I mean, they're like Skull and Crossbones and the Grim Reaper, and like, get this record done, get it done. What is taking you guys so long? I mean, we blew through a Christmas. We blew right through it, and now we're creeping up on the next Christmas, and they're like, it's got to get done. Well, that's when it's time that Michael's going to start doing the lead vocals. Now, you can psychoanalyze it all you want. Michael Prince, he did say something I thought that was kind of interesting. He said, Michael Jackson, one of the reasons that he might hold off on doing a lead vocal that long, it's almost like at that point it's got his fingerprints on it. And now it's a Michael Jackson song. And if it leaks, then it's out. And it almost, and in fact, I think that happened with the Akon song. I'm pretty sure. I think that leaked before they were completely finished with it, if I'm not mistaken. And it kind of spoils dinner. It kind of, the song's not ready yet, but people are already starting to, eat off the plate, sort of. So Michael Prince was kind of implying that, Michael Jackson wouldn't sing the songs, wouldn't do the lead vocal until it's really solidified, because once it leaks, it's done. I don't really think that's exactly how we looked at it. Now, it was two different eras. We're working on tape. Michael Prince is working on hard drives. For us, for a song to leak, it'd basically be somebody giving a tape away and making a tape of a tape of a tape. And with Michael Prince, yeah, man, once something's on the internet, it's done. It's out there. But I think with us, I joke about this in my events. I'm not going to say Michael was lazy, but because he wasn't. But he was a bit of a procrastinator. And lead vocals are a lot of work. He's got to finish writing the song. He's got to have the lyrics right where he wants them. And then to do a lead vocal with Michael Jackson, I don't want to say it's an event, because we did so many of them and we were good at it. But there was a lot of steps that went into a lead vocal. Seth would come in, and this was all on Michael's doing. It wasn't, nobody was telling Michael to do this. But Seth Riggs would come in with Michael literally 2 hours before the session. And Michael's paying him, out of pocket. And they're doing the vocal warm-ups. They're warming up. Michael is warming up and opening up his voice for 2 hours. I don't know of another artist that does vocal warm-ups that intensively. So you've got the vocal warm-ups. Then you've got almost the MJ setup. And probably just out of your field of vision, I have several tube traps in this room. They're remarkable at making a room sound better, making a vocal sound better, easing back on a lot of the reflections in a room. So we would use tube traps. We would use gobos. We would use a drum platform that Michael would sing on. And there were all these pieces to the puzzle. And we would do this for background vocals too, but especially lead vocals. Lead vocals are kind of the big show. So Michael would come in and do the vocal warm-ups. I would set up the drum platform. I would set up the microphone. If it was, Bruce would have already told me which mic he wants to use. On some songs, it was a Shure SM7. On other songs, it was a Telefunken 251 or a U47. So the microphone has to be set up. The headphones have to be set up. The headphones, have to be clean. I would clean the headphones. I would test the headphones. We would have hot water, hot Evian that Michael would sip on, through his entire vocal session. We'd have all the lights off. All the lights would be completely off in the studio. Bruce and I would have, just the control room would be really dimly lit. And there was no one there. Michael was very particular about no guests. We really wouldn't have anybody else in the room. If it was one of Bruce's songs or one of Bill's songs, it would either be me and Bill or me and Bruce. Teddy kind of had his own team, but it wasn't a party. It wasn't, bring 7 of your friends and, and your aunt, to come into the studio and watch Michael Jackson sing. It was a big deal, and we treated it like a big deal. We were good at it. We were used to it, but all of this took time. And I mean, I could have the room ready for Michael in a couple hours. The machines were always ready. We took just meticulous care of the console and the signal path and Bruce's microphones. So it's not like we're walking into a circus, every time we're going to do an MJ vocal, but it was still a good bit of work. And, of course we didn't have cell phones back then, which was kind of a blessing, but the phones in the control room would be shut off. I mean, it was very focused. It was very intentional and intense in a good way, a good intense, between the artist and the engineer. To go through that whole process and be vocal ready, I resonate a lot with what Michael Prince said, that, once Michael does it, man, his fingerprints are on that song. It's a Michael Jackson song at that point. Even though it was kind of a Michael Jackson song before with the scratch vocal, but this is the big leagues. Now it's time to get really serious and settle in. You might be asking yourself, how many lead vocals would we do? How many takes? And it's a valid question. It varied by song. It varied by producer. On some songs, Michael might do 12, 16, 20 lead vocals. On other songs, he might do 35, 40. Michael would just sing. He would sing and sing and sing. And to resonate off of what Michael Prince said, you wouldn't imagine deleting those vocals or cutting them or, destroying the computer. It's just utter nonsense. Michael could sing, 35 vocals, just bang them out. They're not all perfect. They're all really good. They're all very interesting. He might make a mistake. He might start to giggle. He might go off pitch. But Bruce was there, and we would, stop the tape and, say, all right, let's go back and pick that line up again and keep going. So then you've got this kind of paint set that you can work with, where you've got 30, 35, 40 lead vocals, and they're spectacular. And it's an absolute treat, to sit and listen to them and compare, vocal 1 with vocal 22 and vocal 6 and vocal 13. And Michael was good at it. Then we would do what's called comping. And I talk about that pretty intensively in my live events, what comping is, and maybe we'll talk about that another time. But this isn't something that we did without Michael. It's not like he had no idea what we were doing. He was there. He was very intentionally in the moment. So for him to somehow change his whole method of working, when he was working, apparently on some of these Casio tracks, and saying, be sure and erase all my vocals and, let's just comp it, in secret and, delete everything else. Just makes no logical sense. And I think anybody that knew Michael or understands Michael's working style can completely understand that. So vocals, I sometimes say vocals are kind of the big show, and it's something that you're proud of. And when you record Michael's vocals, at the end of the day, it's incredibly satisfying and gratifying to listen to that beautiful voice and the control that he had. So that's really what I wanted to talk to you about is, again, the unfortunate thing with this whole mess is that there is some beautiful music on this, I think, and unfortunately it's so tainted that a lot of MJ fans have just kind of given up on it, or they hate the whole project, throw the baby out with the bathwater, which I think is unfortunate. The other unfortunate reality, and this is something that I think is kind of glaringly obvious, when you listen to Damien's podcast, is, let's be clear, I don't pretend to know everything. I barely know anything. But knowing Michael's working style and kind of the fiasco that this was, Brad Buxer and I don't want to say we disagree, because I love Brad Buxer. I really do. I don't think there's that many amazing finished songs in the vault. Now, Brad Buxer says he calls me Sundberg. He's like, Sundberg, there's some great stuff, that's tucked away that you haven't heard yet. And I almost, I hope he's right. I really do. I hope there's some gems in there that I haven't heard yet. But I do know how Michael worked. And it would seem, just by looking at it, that what the estate and what Sony was having to work with, trying to piece this thing together, I don't think there's a whole lot of finished music, because Michael didn't sing a lot of lead vocals until the very end of a project, when the gas was turned up a little bit and we had to get the project done. And the record company is jumping up and down, and Michael's manager is jumping up and down. And that's kind of when, we would set up the big mic and heat up the water and bring out the tube traps, and bang, Michael would just start banging out these vocals. So, that's not meant to be overly pessimistic. Maybe Buxer's right. Maybe there are some gems in there. MJ fans love to talk about the leaks and the unfinished songs and all that. And it's a tough one, because Michael really liked to deliver a finished product. And I'm not the biggest Prince fan in the world. No bad feelings at all. But I know people like Prince, different artists that, man, they just release everything. Their estate just says, here, take it all. And Michael really didn't, that wasn't exactly the way that he liked his fans to hear his music. So where's it all going? I don't know. I don't know, if there are some amazing gems are tucked away in the vault, or if they're going to, go back to some of the older stuff that we worked on years and years ago and kind of release it as is. I don't know. But it's been fun to kind of dig into this, and huge shout out to Damien. And it's been kind of, if whether or not you know me that well, I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of MJ music. People kind of roll their eyes when I say that, but I don't, because this stuff is very special to me. I love talking about it. I love sharing it with my groups, but I don't, sink in and listen to Michael for 18 hours a day. I just don't. So this has been probably the past week or so, I've been listening to Damien's podcast, and it's just been interesting to kind of, dig into that side of it and kind of his perspective, and to hear his perspective. And man, shout out to the tremendous amount of work. So that's what we got. My goodness, we've got a couple really great events coming up in the next few weeks. We're coming to Copenhagen. We're going to be in Copenhagen on the 10th and 11th of October. Maybe you're hearing this long after that, but I love Copenhagen, one of my favorite cities. We're going to be doing mixing and stories in the studio with MJ, followed by a full day of In the Studio with MJ, where we talk about Bad, Dangerous, and history. And then a week later, on the 17th and 18th of October, we're going to be in Oslo, one of my favorite cities. I'm Swedish. I love to go hang out with my Norwegian brothers and and spend a bit of time there. So we will be in Oslo, Norway on the 17th and 18th. Exact same agenda, mixing in stories in the studio with MJ. Honestly, I've been in the production room next door most of the afternoon just prepping some of those tracks. It is such a fun event. I can't recommend it highly enough. And the next day, the full in the studio with MJ, the foundation of my live events. And it's just such a fun way to spend the day going through Captain EO, Bad, Dangerous, and History. So that's what I got. I hope you're having a great week. Go listen to Damien's podcast. Give it a listen, Faking Michael, and I will talk to you soon. Take care. In the Studio, the podcast is produced by Maddie Sundberg. Theme music performed by Buddy Nuanez. Artwork by Andy Healy. Studio electronics provided by Golden Age Project, and studio acoustics provided by Acoustic Sciences Corporation. My name is Brad Sundberg. Thanks so much for hanging out with us in the studio.